We're starting off now with the 7th and final session about business planning for agritourism enterprises. My name's Lisa Chase. I'm with University of Vermont Extension and also with the Vermont Tourism Research Center. And the webinar today and this whole series is hosted jointly by the Global Agritourism Network and also the National Extension Tourism Network Agritourism Working Group. Thanks to funding from the Northeast Extension Risk Management Center, we're able to provide this series and also one-on-one consultations afterwards free of charge. This is the closing session of this 7-week series, so we do have a different format. We're going to start off with a quick overview of each of the 6 sections that we've already covered in the AgPlan business planning template. And then we'll open up for Q&A. But you are welcome to drop questions into chat at any time. And when we do open up for Q&A, feel free to unmute, turn on your video, ask questions, and share your experiences. We've had some really amazing back and forth in the chat throughout the past 6 weeks, where people ask a question and we, the panelists, have some answers to share, but also all of you joining us today have so much experience and knowledge to share as well, and we welcome you to do that. And then after the Q&A, we're going to close with some next steps in terms of one-on-one consultations and other ways that you can follow up and keep the business planning process going. We know that while we're here at the end of this 7-week session, and that's a big milestone, and hopefully many of you have completed drafts of your business plan during this period, we know that for many, you're just getting going. I've heard from a lot of people who have said, I'm showing up, I'm working on it, but I've got a ways to go. So we'll talk about, we can continue to support you through this process, even after this series is over. And I am fortunate today to be joined by Will Culler from Clemson, Curtis Monken from the Center for Farm Financial Management, and Lindsay Paschow from Cornell Cooperative Extension. And I know I've got some other colleagues out there as well who have lots of experience, as well as many of you in the field working on your own farms and ranches and different agritourism operations. So during the past 6 weeks, we've covered quite a bit, and we're now going to take a few moments to go through some of the highlights of what we've covered, starting with the first week, which was a business overview and description. Curtis, I'm going to let you talk about that since you and Zach led that session.
Well, and I mean, I see the chat that just came in about how the timing wasn't necessarily right and that you're going to come back to it. The business description is actually a great place to come back to, because you can come in and that's the first place we always tell you to go look at. It allows you to really get off on the right foot because you're talking about what you're doing. You talk about what you know. And that's really the best place to kick off your business plan is the business description, because you're just talking about what you do. So don't worry if you haven't gotten to it yet. Just come back, start right there.
That's great. Thank you, Curtis. Lindsay, you did a great job sharing a whole lot of information about operations. Can you give us some highlights?
So during the operations section, we looked at what you're producing and the types of services you're providing on your agritourism operation. And then overall about not everybody's going to be producing things on their farm, but if you're producing, importance to include a production structure of how things are made on your farm. And I gave examples of like a lot about making candles or beauty products or wreath making classes. So you like to include that information. Also information that we included in the operations sections was like customer service. Agritourism is one of the things we're going to have a lot of customer interaction. So it's important to have a good customer service plan. We also talked about inventory management, different licensing permits and regulations, patents and trademarks. And I think a lot of times with the license permits, regulations, patents, and trademarks, you're always continuing to update that because things are changing in an operation. And then we also covered risk management, environmental issues, and then quality control implementation timelines. So I feel like the operations section is a huge section of information of what's happening with a lot of different moving parts, depending on how robust your agritourism operation is.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm going to turn it over to Will now, who's going to talk about first marketing and then the management and the organization section.
Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon from South Carolina down here. Marketing plan, you've got to remember your marketing plan will depend on a few things. Why you're doing agritourism, what do you want to reach, or who do you want to reach, and what are you offering? And of course, it can be challenging or it can be very easy depending on how you market your product or services. Because of this, we were very deliberate in our sections, including market trends, customers, market segments, target market, sales strategy, competition, pricing is very important, promotion, and strategic partners. For the management and organization section, your management and organization plan outlines how your business is led and managed. It demonstrates the competence of your organization and gives you confidence to investors, lenders, and other stakeholders. The sections that we focus on are management team, your advisory board, your personnel plan, your volunteers, professional services, and your succession plan.
That's great. Thank you, Will. Curtis, back to you on financials.
The financials can be one of the most difficult sections to work on, but they don't have to be scary, and they are quite important when it comes to that. So in that section, we did talk about starting from talking about your financial position with the balance sheet, then moving into doing some cash flow projections and the various pieces that go along with all that. And then ultimately, if you are going to be going and asking for a loan, the financials are a very important section in getting to that capital request so that you can tightly tie all that up. And really, I always like to think about the financials as really just a treasure map because that's really what's going on and what you're planning on doing really then flows in and it shows up on your financials. So lots of resources there within that, but you don't have to be scared of them. I know a lot of people are scared about the financials, but you don't have to. There's lots of resources that are out there to help.
Treasure map. I don't think I've heard that one before. That's good. Lindsay, tell us about the executive summary, last, but also first.
Yes. Yeah. So the executive summary, I think is one of probably the most important parts of your overall business plan because it summarizes your overall business. It's the first thing that somebody's going to see when they're looking at your business plan. And I gave an example before of just like reading, getting interested in a good book. If you're not interested within the first, paragraph, couple pages, you just stop reading a book. And same thing with a business plan is the executive summary section is you've got to really have it well written and make sure it's engaging so that the people that are reading it might be, it might be a grant, it might be an investor that they want to continue reading on more and learn more about your business and what you're looking to do.
Thanks, Lindsay. Like you mentioned last week, it's typically the last section written, but the first section that other people are going to see. Now that we've gone over a little what we've covered for the past 6 weeks, just want to check in with some polls here. And we're going to go back to the very first poll in the very first session, which is describe yourself and check as many boxes as fits what you do. I know many of you are farmer ranchers, but you also do lots of other things as well. Okay, ending the poll and sharing the results. And we are primarily producers, over 3/4 producers, and about half business owners, managers. Guessing there's a lot of overlap there. And then we do have a few extension service providers, nonprofit, educators, researchers, but by and large, farmers, which is great. And now I've got one last question, which is something else that you've seen before. How is your business planning going? I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like we do have someone who's all caught up with the sections in AgPlan. Congratulations. That is a huge accomplishment. And we have quite a few people who have started and they're working on it. Almost 2/3 are in that category. And then we've got some folks, almost a quarter, who are planning to do it, haven't started yet. And then some folks who are joining us. Well, thank you for being here today, regardless of where you are with the business planning. I'm now gonna stop my share and let's open it up. I'm taking a look in chat, but I especially wanted to reach out to some of the folks who've been joining us regularly throughout this series and have been providing great feedback in the chat. So Alan Binger from a Christmas tree farm in Ohio, would you be willing to introduce yourself and share a little bit about how this is working for you?
Sure, I would be happy to. Greetings from Ohio. Well, a little bit about my farm. I'm a little bit more seasoned than some of you guys probably. I started the farm in 2000, and probably at least for the last 15 years, I'm embarrassed to say, I've been saying I need to do a business plan. And for a lot of reasons, mostly the thought of where to start, I have put it off. And when I saw the very first session that you guys did about how this ag plan would work, I thought, hey, this might work for me. And certainly it surely did. I've been able to keep up each week. One thing I did discover last week was the first week I couldn't be here live. And so I went back and did the recording to do that last section. And I think I should have done them all that way because it was so nice to be able to freeze the video. Because before I was trying to make notes in the plan, I split screen up and I would try to make notes. And then when it was over, I'd go in and try to finish it up. But last week, by watching just the video, I was able to stop it, write that section, start the thing again. And that worked really great. But one thing I wanted to say, because of where my business is now, the chances of me going out looking for debt are probably pretty slim. But although I do think there was a lot of value in writing down the improvements that I think that I need to make it on the farm, and just the fact that they're there and that I plan on self-funding them, I think there's a lot of value to just writing that down. But the one thing that I think has a lot of value for me is because at some point, at my age, I don't know if my kids are going to take over the farm or if I'm going to sell it or whatever. And I think having this business plan is going to give me a lot of value when I go to try to make that, that transfer of ownership over, which, to have all the history, everything we went through to start the farm, the zoning variances, all my suppliers, how we get labor, pest management, all that stuff is all written in here now, and I can hand it to someone, or God forbid something happens to me. I feel like it's kind of a disaster recovery plan in a way, because I can hand it over to my family, and they can get a good idea of what I've been doing, because it's been pretty much a one-man show all this time. So to have this down there, I think is really a great advantage. And one other thing I wanted to say, I just, because this morning I'm laying in bed and I happened to think, something I wanted to put in the business plan, because I put a bunch of stuff in there about pest management, but I use phenology, the growing degree days, for my spraying. And I thought of that this morning because it's time to spray for white pine weevil. And I thought, I need to go back in my plan. It's so nice to be able just to go in there, update it. I mean, it's so easy to use. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just worked out really great for me.
That's great to hear, Alan. And it sounds like you have plans to actually do a training at your
Yeah,
Christmas Tree Association. Yeah,
yeah,
tell us
Ohio
about
is,
that.
yeah, we're hosting this year, the Mid-America Christmas Tree Association's summer meeting is in Ohio this year, which is Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Pennsylvania. And so I offered to do a session, and we're going to do that. We're going to do a 1 hour session, which is going to be kind of similar to what your very first session was. Although I think I'll be able to log in and show them the sections and pull up my plan and show them. I think that it's going to be a good session for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. You'll have to let us know how it goes, and maybe we'll
Yeah.
have you on as a speaker, because I will say, I mean, everyone out here who's a farmer, we all know you want to hear from the
Yeah.
other farmers.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
how we learn
extension.
everything. I always say I've got a
Exactly.
lot of great ideas on my farm, but very few of them are original.
Right.
Borrow stuff from everybody else. We've kind of got more into the agritourism with wine and wreath classes and story time with Mrs. Claus. We've been doing a lot more with photo sessions, like booking the farm out for photo sessions, that kind of thing. And all that, to have all that written down in here, I think is just great.
All right. Well, to the extent that, more and more states are getting involved in starting agritourism associations, or, as part of the Christmas Tree Association or the Fruit and Vegetable Association, there may be, different opportunities to talk about agritourism and direct sales and on-farm education, to the extent that any of us who are here today can help out with those sessions and supporting those efforts, we're happy to do that. I now so I'll just say anyone's welcome to raise hands at any point, but I do wanna, Alan, unless you had any closing comments, not that you're going anywhere, but anything else before I ask another farmer to chime in?
Yeah, I think so. The only thing if I was saying that I had one little issue is it'd been nice to be able to download, maybe there's a way to do it, download PDFs into the document. I see you can do attachments, but I've had to convert everything to like a JPEG or something, which has not been a problem. I've been able to pull those in, but I thought it'd be nice sometimes, especially with my financials, to be able to pull in a PDF. I don't know if anybody has any other suggestions on that. I think that's the only other thing I had written down.
All right, Curtis, that one's all you.
Yeah. So Alan, let me just follow that up. So you're trying to download your plan as a PDF, or you're trying to
No, I'm trying to insert a PDF like a profit and loss or something like sales figures and bring them into the document. And I've had to just like do a screenshot and then bring the JPEG in, which it works.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. So if you're wanting to pull specific pieces into where you're writing, you would have to either insert it as an image, or I know others have used, like if you're doing something in Excel, you can copy and paste from Excel or Word into the document. But the other place, obviously, that as I've trained on AgPlan over the years, is to upload the attachment as a PDF and then to reference that. So something like, as referenced in the balance sheet, in the included balance sheet, this is, what we're showing, something like that.
But I can't believe how all the great features that are in here, as far as, changing you can really make it pretty. It really, I mean, I
Right.
at first thought I would probably do all this and then bring it into a Word document and pretty it up, but you really don't have to. I mean, I can print it off and hand it to somebody right now, I think, and be pretty happy with it.
Right. And, and you could always, if you're inserting like your farm logo into maybe that cover page,
Yep.
you could always export your business plan into a Word document, and then you can always copy and paste some of that information back up. So,
But I mean, I've got a lot of pictures. I brought, pictures of all my equipment basically in, and that's just great. I love it.
That's great. All right. We do have an interesting question, actually some back and forth going on in chat, starting with Kate Nelligan, saying, you know, I feel kind of silly saying this, but I'm hesitating having people, customers, visitors over because I don't think it's beautiful enough. Any thoughts? And I just want to say you are not alone. I can't tell you how many farms I visit in Vermont that start with a walkthrough of, you know, what do you want to show to people? You can have closed sections, you know, that big pile of whatever that's behind the barn. You can, you know, nobody ever has to see that. People don't need to. In fact, people shouldn't be allowed to just wander wherever on your farm, because that's not just an aesthetic issue, that's a safety issue. So a big part of agritourism is really deciding for yourself, what do you want to showcase on your farm to visitors? How do you want to interact and connect and educate visitors? And then focusing on those specific areas and being able to, you know, really showcase those in the way that you want to. And I noticed there was some really good back and forth, and a colleague, Rachel Callahan from University of California, who's been involved in this process from day one, put a great answer in there. So Rachel, would you mind introducing yourself and chiming in? I think we always get quite a few farms from California, so it'll be great for them to get to know you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Lisa. Rachel Callahan, the statewide agritourism coordinator with the University of California. Happy to see so many California folks on the call, a few faces that I know, so it's great to see you all. I just think nobody is harder on themselves than a farmer or rancher on their own property. You just see everything you want to fix, everything you didn't get to. But for those of us who can come from an outside perspective, it's different from what people see every day who don't live in agricultural rural lands. They're going to, generally speaking, be impressed. I had a farmer, actually, he owns a vineyard and started doing Harvest Host during the pandemic and said, I don't think anyone would want to come. Like, who wants to bring their RV to my land? And I said, people park their RVs in Walmart parking lots. Your vineyard is nicer, even if it's not up to your standards of what you want it to be. So I think don't underestimate yourself. And also you can pick key areas to beautify, put some, you know, native perennials or a pollinator garden or something like that in a few key areas where people might be gathering, just so I hate to say this, so there is a little photo op, because unfortunately that's the world that we live in. But I think showing people the reality of what a working farm or ranch looks like is part of the agritourism experience. And you don't have to pretend that everything is in its perfect little place. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, such an important point. And it's so true that we, you know, we on our farms working in agriculture all the time sort of take for granted what actually is really an amazing thing to people who aren't used to it. And that's part of the fun for me of agritourism, is you get to see the farm through somebody else's eyes, and it can bring new appreciation of what it is that you're doing and recognition for what you're doing. I want to take a moment to open up to a farmer from Vermont, Michelle with Firefly Farm. Would you be willing to say hello and share a little bit?
Yes.
Hi, Michelle. How's it going?
Good. So first of all, thank you for this pre-plan and this whole webinar series. It's been incredibly helpful. And so I came into this having a very small business plan. We've been in existence since 2019, but we're in a pretty big growth phase. One segment of that being agritourism, but overall we're just in a really big growth phase. So it made sense to really rethink it, not just update our existing plan. So the timing was perfect for us, and I mostly appreciated the structure of being able to watch and then go do. And sometimes I was able to do the whole section, and sometimes I was I just like did a lot of bullets, knowing that I would come back to it. But I could at least do that right when everything was fresh. And like Alan said, sometimes I wasn't able to make it and I used the recording instead. And that was really wonderful, being able to pause and jot things down and come back where I left off and go from there. So I absolutely appreciated the structure. I'm not a tech savvy person and I found it really easy to use. So I appreciated that too. I appreciated that I could get on and do some work and come back to it. Knowing that it was going to be saved. However, I did get to a place last week where I opened it up and there was nothing there. And I had a whole bunch of blank boxes and I freaked out. And tech support responded right away and assured me that they could see my work, even though I couldn't. So I felt better. I still don't know if it was an internet issue, if I did something, there was something up with AgPlan, but the work was there and it was like a half hour or so and they had everything back to me and they were super responsive and I'm appreciative. Yeah, exactly. So what else? I love that you can customize it. There were some things that, I mean, maybe I'll go back and use them anyway, but there were parts that I just didn't really know what I wanted to say in them. And I noticed that when you print them out, it just leaves it out. It doesn't look like you have a blank. It just still makes it look pretty, like Alan was saying. And then that piece just isn't there. And one of the things I was thinking, at least for me, could have been a little bit more helpful. The samples in the executive summary section I thought were fabulous. And there were some times that I was looking for samples, trying to brainstorm a little bit more using a sample, and there were sections that either didn't have them or maybe could have used a broader variety, or anyway, I thought samples might be helpful to just add a few more. But mostly, thank you to both AgPlan folks and to those of you that put on this webinar at UVM. It was super, super helpful and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Michelle. And that's important to hear. We could do a better job of making sure that we've got solid samples for every section. So yeah, we really appreciate that sort of feedback. I see in chat a question from Gordon Helm about which sections of the business plan are most important. Gordon, do you want one of us to read the question in chat? Do you want to unmute and share it?
Hi, how are you? Thanks for allowing me to, I guess, speak, and thanks for the session. I guess I'm having done these before in the past with other businesses, and then spending all the time in doing it, and then never looking at it again. I guess in addition to that, with having, planning's coming up with, I have a Christmas tree farm also, so I got Christmas trees that are coming in. I'm also trying to, I guess, add additional crops. So I got 2 acres of blackberries that are coming in that I got to deal with. And so time is a little bit short at the moment. And I'm trying to, I guess, spend my time where it's most needed and where it makes the most sense in doing this. And I guess in having done these things in the past and never looking at the business plan again after doing them, I'm a little, I guess, being a little skeptical and a little hesitant about where I want to spend my time. The difference in the project that I'm looking at now is I'm looking at wanting to build a campground with an RV park, and it's a little more, I guess, on the construction side of things as opposed to being a service industry or just a plain, retail business or something along those lines. And so I want to present this business plan for lending purposes. Obviously the financial component, it would be very critical to a lender that's looking at this, or a potential lender that's looking at this. What other parts are probably the most critical? It sounds like the executive summary probably is very critical, because my guess is that the lenders are not going to spend 4 hours or whatever time it's going to take to go through every detail that's in this plan. So where do I want to focus my energy and my time to get this so that it meets what the primary objectives of the lenders are, without, I guess, spending a bunch of extra time on areas that may not be reviewed by the lender or feel are really all that critical by the lender?
Really important question. Will, I saw you had dropped an answer into chat. Do you want to share a little bit more?
Yeah, I feel like you've got to get to a place where you understand this is to help you stay on point. This is your guidebook, and you've got to revisit this plan, every one of the sections on a regular basis, whether that regular basis is every quarter, every half a year, every year, whatever basis it is makes sense for you. You've got to be able to get to a point where it's that. Now, you're not at that point yet, perhaps. Perhaps you need to make sure your business plan is done to a point where okay, this is good. Now I can go forward, but you've still got to revisit. And when I say revisit, I mean every section, because every section there has got a meaning, it's got a purpose. And a lot of times they hold each other up. Each section does. So you've got to understand that, focusing on one section is going to affect the other sections also in a negative or positive way.
Okay.
I know that wasn't as direct to answer as you wanted to get that. So,
I can add to that, Will. Obviously, as you've identified, the financial part is going to be a big piece of that, obviously. As you start to get into it, if you're breaking the pieces down, obviously, I think I would probably start with operations, because you're starting to think about licensing and, a lot of those. The executive summary is a pretty important one. But keep in mind, the executive summary is just summarizing everything else that's in your plan. But Will's absolutely right. Your business plan, once you've kind of gotten more in, it becomes an operations guide. You can share that with your, it's not just necessarily for the lenders. You're sharing that with employees, partners, family members. Alan said this earlier. I mean, it's something that other people are going to just take and use. If you're wanting to work on a transition plan, you can start to work on that part. So there's lots of pieces, but if you're focusing right now on making these changes, financial operations, I mean, as you start to think about what a lender is going to ask for to make sure that that their investment in you is going to be well taken care of, they probably will have questions in some of those areas, licensing, financials, obviously, but they're going to want to know, how are you in the marketing? How are you going to get people to your glamp ground? So all of those sections do become important, but prioritizing, making sure that the lender is making sure that you are a good investment. I think that's what you really kind of have to identify.
Okay, so let me ask you a follow-up question on that. So where or how would you, I guess, put in or include a proof of concept? Okay, because I guess what I've done is, like I said, I've got a Christmas tree farm, and what I'm looking at doing is adding a campground, glamp ground. Well, I started looking at doing this 5-6 years ago, and somebody suggested, well, why don't you try hip camp? Because, that might be a way to try and, see whether or not this would work out or not. And like Rachel said, with regards to, Harvest Host or whatever, I thought, okay, well, I'll give that a shot. Well, it for lack of better words, it worked out very well. In 2021, we were voted the #1 hip camp in California. In 2022, we were voted the #1 RV and tent hip camp in the United States. In 2023, the county found out about us and shut us down. So, I mean, from a proof of concept perspective, the campground concept obviously works. I had over 1,000 positive reviews on hip camp, probably hosted close to 10,000 people over that 4 or 5 year period. Where does that come into consideration, with regards to the business plan and a lender taking those kind of things into consideration?
So, and for your business plan in particular, just exactly everything that you just said, the section that I would go to in AgPlan, it's under the business description section. It's the business history, and just take exactly what you just said and write it out there.
right.
That's exactly where that type of information should go. Because then you're also talking about your business overview, where you're located. But once you get into, this was really successful, here's how we want to take it further. The business history is where I start.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
If I could jump in,
Absolutely. Here,
why don't
start by introducing yourself. You've been a tremendous resource throughout this 6-week session, typing into chat and chiming in with great responses. So take a moment, introduce yourself, and also go ahead and add to this response here.
Sure. Hi, I'm Pierre Cormier. I'm in Alberta, Canada. I'm a service provider, nearly 10 years working with farm families in agritourism. We've been doing work in agriculture prior to that as well. But Gordon, how about this? Sounds like you're a busy guy. You've got a proof of concept. So I know where your head's at right now. But your banker, if you're gonna ask for somebody to invest, banker, or even investors, they're gonna, like, just like Curtis said, they're gonna want to make sure that you're a safe investment and they're gonna get their money back. So how are they going to feel good? It's about information, that roadmap that Will referred to, that can be used not just for the banker, but will be used for you and your staff and other folks. But how about talking to this banker and asking him or her, what is she looking for?
That's a good
Because you
point.
have to play by their rules, right? So why don't you have that conversation? And you're going to start building a relationship with them, and they'll help you focus. They'll give you tips. They'll give you the templates. We already have a great template here, but
Yeah.
they're going to give you, they're going to prioritize. So, by looking at financials, looking at proof of concept is fine, but there's no, there's still no guarantee, because if you're going to take this to the next level, then, it's a different model than what you're using. You should use that proof of concept to back up your assumptions in your plan and so on. But I think you need to use this, and you don't have to write it thick. It can be short and somewhat sweet. It has to be sweet and somewhat short, but it has to be enough that it actually makes sense and there's a good flow. So, but I would try, and I did this years ago when I started a small business myself over 30 years ago. I talked to my banker first. I asked him, I said, what are you looking for? And he fed me. And he actually appreciated those conversations that we did the back and forth.
That's a
And
great
so,
idea.
so why don't you start building your relationship with, and don't just see one bank, see 3 banks.
Yeah. All right. Great idea. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Good luck.
Yes. All right, we've got some more questions coming into chat and also in the Q&A box. Leslie, I see a question about working with professionals in the hospitality industry. Do you want to unmute and ask that question? Hi, Leslie.
Hi, sure, gladly. I just wondered about your advice and also other people's experiences working with people in the hospitality industry on things like the question about site design and aesthetics, or questions about working with that public. So for example, like the Small Business Administration, I've wondered if maybe I should be asking for a mentor from that industry rather than somebody from agriculture. But and also then I wondered about whether people have looked at actual partnerships, like business partnerships with people who are already established in that industry. I mean, specifically, we're looking at our 5-year plan is to establish an Irish pub on our place as part of the agritourism. And, we don't know about that stuff.
Yeah, really, really important point. Leslie, where are you located and what's your farm like?
We're in southwest central Indiana. So our farm isn't very good for farming. We're in a recovered limestone quarry along the river. So it's really a story about regenerative agriculture and kind of ecological reclaiming. So we just have a few acres, and so we raise heritage breeding stock and then related products out of that.
Yes, well, I'm guessing there's a lot of people here with a lot of experience making those connections with tourism and hospitality. So, anyone who wants to answer can unmute or type into chat. And in the meantime, I'll say here in Vermont, that relationship between agriculture and tourism is so important. And, really, it's essential that as a state, but also on individual farms, when we're thinking about design and those pieces, that we're not just working with the Agency of Agriculture to make sure we've got the permits and we're following the right regulations. We're also working with the Department of Health, sometimes the Department of Education when there's educational programs going on. And we're working with local destination marketing organizations and chambers of commerce. So I think you are really onto something very important, that agritourism brings together the agriculture and the tourism and the education pieces. And so our Agency of Agriculture in Vermont provides a lot of good information, but working with the Vermont Chamber and the Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing, as well as the local destination marketing organizations, is also super important. Small Business Administration, SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, these can all be incredibly helpful in not just with business planning, but other aspects of your, figuring out what's right for you. Because the challenging thing, like you mentioned, if you're going to be serving alcohol and, essentially having kind of a tourism establishment on your farm, there's going to be a lot more regulations involved. And depending on where you are, that piece may not count as agriculture. It may be exclusively under the jurisdiction of tourism. So it's really important to make those connections early on. And one other piece that I often mention is, before you start to do any kind of diversification on your farm, check in with your neighbors. We've seen the biggest conflicts and problems happen because a neighbor says, wait a minute, what are all these people doing here? I'm not okay with this. And then things escalate from there and can unfortunately get ugly. So check in with your neighbors and also check in with your local planning board. And the more that you can do to kind of help your community, your neighbors and your local community get behind you and get excited about what you're doing, that can be very helpful when you're working your way through regulatory processes and licenses and permits. I'll stop there and see if anyone else wants to chime in to answer that question, or we can move on to some other questions.
Just a suggestion, having been, I don't know how well your Chamber of Commerce is organized over there where you're at. The one that we have here in El Dorado County, also has basically they contract with the county to do the promotion for the county. So they're called the Visitors Authority. They will do a lot of promotions for local tourism, agritourism type organizations. So, I don't know, again, it depends on what level or what kind of, chamber that you have, but you might want to get involved with them and see how they could help you out, because I know the one that's here also has contacts with the Economic Development Department with the county, and, connects with them. So there's a resource there that might help.
Great point. We've got a few comments from Carl Frost, who's been a regular here at this series, with some additional suggestions for what could be included in this type of series or potentially in a business plan. Carl, did you want to unmute, or do you want me to summarize what you've got into chat?
Oh, you're doing a good job.
Okay, let's see. They're long, so I'm going to summarize. One suggestion for a module is around government relations and offsite impacts. From the state capital to the local government, farms are subject to multiple layers of oversight and control. So true. And then there's protection laws. So that could potentially be be an addition. And actually, I have a question for Curtis from AgPlan. I mean, there are pieces where that could be addressed in a business plan. It is, there's so many differences across a local area, a municipality versus a county, then a state, and then you get to different states, and it can get very complicated. Do you want to weigh in, Curtis, about where those pieces would fit in this business planning process?
So I see a couple places, and Katie Johnson from our team is also on the call here now. So Katie, if I'm missing a place where you think some of this could go, location, I think that's talk a little bit about it there, facilities, but really operations, I think, is where I would start to put in a lot of that information. Where, let me actually just get back to that question, but I think any of those sections, licenses, permits, regulations, environmental issues, I mean, you are aware of what some of those things are in your areas. So kind of fitting those in, I think they kind of line up pretty easily with any of those sections.
Thank you. I'm going to drop another question into chat that Magic put into Q&A. Magic, do you want to unmute and share it, or should I summarize it from chat?
Hi, Lisa. Could you please summarize the question for me? I appreciate that.
Yes, I would be happy to.
Thank you.
So the question is regarding wild animal management in agritourism for organic farms. On their farm, it's a big concern for visitor safety. And since they don't spray any chemicals or pesticides, they're looking for suggestions to keep gophers, coyotes, and snakes away. And they do have liability insurance for the farm, and are planning to request visitors sign waivers, but they're still looking for additional advice on how other organic farms handle these types of wild animal issues in order to enhance the visitor's safety. I'll start with an answer and then others can chime in, and I'll start by saying that visitor safety is a huge concern, whether it's about gophers, coyotes, and snakes, or tripping over uneven ground, or food safety issues when people are petting animals and then getting something to eat and maybe haven't washed their hands properly. Not just the wild animals, the farm animals are also a concern. There's so many safety issues, and I don't say this to scare you all, but these are working farms. So what I'll do is I'll drop into chat when I have a moment some information about safety and liability in terms of developing a safety plan for your farm. And that's something that what we've done here in Vermont, and I know many other colleagues around the state have done this as well, and in other countries, is kind of inviting emergency responders and others over to your farm who are not familiar with all the hazards that you're so familiar with, and walking around the farm, pointing out hazards and figuring out what can you address by, say, fixing the broken steps that you just don't even really see because you're so used to it, or making certain areas off limits. A lot of states also have signage that can be posted through an Agritourism Limited Liability Act. And typically it's the same language that would then be used in the waiver. So Magic, I'm not quite sure which state you're from, but we can provide more information about whether you're protected by that. But even if you are, very important that you mentioned that you do have liability insurance. The reality is there's just going to be hazards on a working farm in a natural area. That is part of the adventure and part of the experience and excitement of visiting a working farm. But to the extent possible, what we need to do before the visitors come on the farm, while they're there, and then after they leave, if they do get injured, keep them informed and stay in touch. So when they see your website, tell people, you know, if there are gopher holes all over, or different, you know, hazards and things to be concerned about, don't wear flip-flops, wear proper shoes, don't wear high heels for sure. Give people advice and guidance on how to dress appropriately and then behave appropriately and safely on a farm. And visitors from cities actually really appreciate that sort of guidance, because sometimes it can be a little intimidating for them to visit a working farm, and, you know, they might be afraid of things or not really know what to expect. So while it's not specific to wild animal management, I would say just being very upfront. This is a working farm, and there are things to look out for, and that's part of the fun and excitement. But while you're here, there are things you should know, you know, wear proper footwear, bring bug spray, bring sunscreen, bring rain gear, even if it's sunny when you leave. You never know what the weather's going to be like. Those sorts of pieces of advice. We're starting to run out of time, so I want to open it up to my colleagues. Will, I just saw you on mute. Do you want to chime in?
I was going to address that
Yeah,
real quick on that last question. Specific to the wildlife, your cooperative extension in your state typically does have someone doing wildlife management and can do a wildlife management plan for you, specific to gophers, coyotes, or snakes. I would certainly inquire into or contact the local extension office in your county or state and just see what they do. You know, that's always an issue. And around here, it could be hogs, it could be coyotes, it could be deer, it could be so many things. Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah, so many things. Lindsay Curtis, any closing remarks?
No, just update your business plan when you can.
Keep working away and keep updating it. All right, I will share some final slides as we get ready to wrap up. So homework, it's the last session and I'm still giving you homework. What? This never ends. So first bullet, continue to work on your business plan. Congratulations to those who have completed a draft. Keep working on it though, especially as you get it ready for specific audiences. And even if you're just getting going, that's fine. Just, you know, keep it in the back of your mind. Know it's there. We heard a scary story from Michelle of Firefly Farm where she could not find her business plan. Fortunately, the Center for Farm Financial Management was able to quickly help out and find her business plan. It had not been lost. It was still in AgPlan, but I would say keep a backup, especially if it's something that you're not going to be looking at for a while. The growing season is starting. You're planning to return to it when the leaves drop again in the fall and it's cold again. Save it on a backup file. Maybe even print it out a copy if you're old school like me and you like to have hard copies around. And then another big piece is invite someone to review your plan. And this is something that you can easily do in AgPlan. If you're not using AgPlan, you can still send them the Word document or send them the paper document. But in AgPlan, Curtis, do you want to take a minute to just talk about how the process works for inviting someone to review your plan in AgPlan?
Right. So this might be easier if I actually, well, we don't have time for me to show you, but when you go into AgPlan and you see your plans listed in the My Plans, I'm actually doing this on another screen. That's why it's taking a little bit, but you will see a little area, a little link just to the right of your plan name where it says reviewers. So if you click on that, you can put in someone's email address to invite them into review. They can either come in and then you can actually have them edit your copy, edit your plan, or you can invite them to just come in and comment on it. But put their email address in. If they're already in the system, they'll see it in their reviewers section, or they'll get an invitation if they aren't in AgPlan. So it's a great process. And then you can use the comments features. You can email reviewers from within your plan. Everything is kind of nice and contained right there within AgPlan. But again, you're going to see that when you log into AgPlan, you'll see reviewers, and then you can add people to your plan there.
And if you're wondering who should be a reviewer, I mean, that is really up to you. It could be business partners, family members, employees that you think have a lot of potential and could be helpful to have them weigh in. Or it could be one of the business planning experts that you've met here during the past 6 weeks. If you're interested in one-on-one consultations, that's something that we're able to offer through this program. And 2 slides later, in just a moment, we'll show you a link to a survey where you can say, yes, I want a one-on-one consultation. And then Zach Smith from UVM will be following up with you next week. And he'll be pairing you with people that are from your state. If you're in California, Rachel will be following up with you. If you're in New York, it'll be Lindsay. We've got colleagues all over the country and many in other countries as well. So feel free to sign up with for the one-on-one consultations, and we'll do some matching in the coming weeks. And I do want to mention that something to remember is wherever you are, even if it's just showing up here for the first time, give yourself a pat on the back. You're getting started. Some of you even have a complete business plan, but take time to feel good about what you've accomplished to date. And as we heard earlier, when you do get stuck, we are still here for you. Even though this 7-week series is about to end, Curtis is at the Center for Farm Financial Management with a whole team of folks. And they've got a phone number and an email address and a website. And the recording from today, as well as the past recordings, are all online at this website, go.uvm.edu/agplan. We will keep this information there. It's not going anywhere. It's there for you. And like Alan mentioned earlier, he actually found it more helpful to look through the recording because you can stop it. And I think that's probably especially true for some of the really instructional ones, like getting started with the business description and financials, where we spent some time screen sharing AgPlan and walking you through. That may be helpful for people who like that sort of tutorial. And there are also tutorial videos on AgPlan if you're looking for more. In closing, I want to just one more time thank all of you so much for joining us. Thanks to our many panelists over the last 6 weeks and joining us today as well. One more prompt to fill out this survey. Yes, it's the same survey that you already filled out last week, but do us a favor and do it one more time. This series was free of charge for you because of funding from the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education Center. And the thing they require from us, the price of admission, is reporting. And so we appreciate you taking time to fill out this survey one more time today. Unfortunately, I can't say one last time because we're going to be following up with you in a few months, in August, actually, just before our grant ends. You'll get an email from Zach Smith from UVM saying, hey, how's it going? Checking in. Did you do your business plan? If not, let us know why and let us know how we can help you. And with that, I want to close us out for today and really encourage all of you to stick the course and stay in touch. The 7-week series may be over, but we're not going anywhere. So let's stay in touch. Good luck with business planning. Thank you.